If you're hearing my voice, then I'm already gone. Mary. I've spent 43 years protecting you. Today, I'm going to ask you to protect yourself. Don't open the envelope yet. First, look at our boys. Count to 10. 1, 2, 3. I stood beside my husband's casket without moving. The church was so quiet I could hear someone turning the pages of a hymn book. 4, 5, 6. Our oldest son, Daniel, leaned toward his younger brother, Michael. Neither of them knew the tiny recorder hidden inside the old envelope had already begun playing my husband's final message through the earbuds he had mailed to me the week before. 7, 8, 9. Daniel smiled. Dad really left Mom an envelope. Michael chuckled. Guess he finally admitted she never understood money. 10. I closed my eyes. The tears came. Not because my husband was gone, but because every word they had just spoken, he had predicted. Exactly. The attorney slowly cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now begin reading Mr. Richard Carter's estate plan. The conference room overlooked downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Polished walnut walls. The headquarters Richard and I had built together over 4 decades. Daniel sat confidently at the head of the table. Michael leaned back with a grin. Their wives whispered to each other. Nobody looked at me. They didn't ignore me out of cruelty. They ignored me because they believed I had spent my entire marriage standing quietly behind my husband. In many ways, they were right. I had chosen that place. Richard loved leading. I loved helping him build. Sometimes the strongest person in a family isn't the one speaking at the table. Sometimes she's the one who quietly keeps everyone else standing. Love often looks invisible to the people who only measure importance by who receives the applause. The attorney continued. The family investment portfolio will be divided equally between Daniel Carter and Michael Carter. Both sons exchanged satisfied smiles. The vacation properties will transfer according to Schedule B. Another smile. The operating shares assigned through the executive trust. Daniel nodded before the sentence even ended. He already believed he knew every page. Finally, the attorney stopped. He reached beneath the leather folder. Pulled out an old yellow envelope. The edges were worn. My name was written across the front. Not in formal handwriting. Just the familiar script I had seen on birthday cards. Anniversary notes. And grocery lists. Mary. Only Mary. The attorney stood. This is for Mrs. Carter alone. Daniel laughed softly. Seriously? An envelope? Michael shrugged. Maybe Dad left Mom one last love letter. His wife smiled. That's actually kind of sweet. No one noticed. I wasn't looking at the envelope. I was listening. Richard's voice returned. Soft. Steady. Exactly as I remembered. Don't let them rush you. Not today. They think the inheritance begins with what's inside that envelope. A brief pause. Then he whispered something that made my hands tremble. It doesn't. It begins with the key they'll never think to look for. I slowly placed my hand on the unopened envelope. For the first time since Richard's funeral service began, I realized my husband wasn't finished protecting me. He had simply found another way to stay beside me. Richard's voice remained calm. Mary. Open the envelope now. My fingers trembled as I broke the old seal. Inside, there wasn't a check. There wasn't a bank statement. There wasn't even a letter. Only a small brass key. And a folded index card. Written in Richard's familiar handwriting. Safe Deposit Box 314. Lakeshore Private Bank. Go alone. Across the table, Daniel leaned forward. What is it? It wasn't important. The attorney quietly closed his folder. The remainder of today's documents have been distributed according to Mr. Carter's instructions. Daniel stood immediately. I'll schedule a board meeting tomorrow. Michael checked his phone before anyone had even left the room. Life moved on quickly. Almost too quickly. Only I remained seated. Richard's voice returned through the tiny earbud. I knew they'd lose interest. They always stop looking when they think they've already won. Sometimes people don't miss the greatest treasures because they're hidden. They miss them because they've already decided what success is supposed to look like. Pride has a strange way of closing our eyes long before life asks us to see. The next morning, I drove alone to Lakeshore Private Bank. The building stood just a few blocks from the office Richard and I had visited countless times over the years. Yet, I had never entered the private vault level. A senior banker greeted me. Mrs. Carter. We've been expecting you. Those words caught me off guard. You were expecting me? He nodded. Your husband visited us several times over the past 6 months. He left very specific instructions. No further explanation. Only quiet professionalism. He escorted me through 2 security doors. Down a private hallway. Until we stopped in front of box 314. The banker handed me a small envelope. Mr. Carter requested that you read this before opening the box. I unfolded the note. Mary. If you're standing here, then you've already done the hardest thing. You walked into a future that no longer includes me. I wish I could have walked beside you. Instead, I've left breadcrumbs. One step at a time. Not because I don't trust you. Because I know you're grieving. And grief makes even the strongest heart forget how capable it truly is. Tears blurred the page. 43 years together. And somehow, he still knew exactly what I would need. Not money. Not instructions. Confidence. I slipped the brass key into the lock. The heavy metal door clicked open. Inside rested a black leather portfolio. One sealed USB drive. Another envelope. And an old photograph. Richard and me. Standing outside our very first office. Back when we owned nothing more than a folding desk. A borrowed phone. And impossible dreams. My hands gently touched the photograph. Richard's voice returned. Before you look at anything else, turn the picture over. I slowly flipped it. Taped to the back was another key. Smaller. Silver. Beneath it, only 7 handwritten words. Not every vault is built by banks. I stared at the tiny key. A chill ran through me. For the first time, I realized this was never about an inheritance. Richard had been building something. Long before any of us knew he was preparing to say goodbye. Richard's voice waited until my hand closed around the small silver key. Then he spoke again. You're wondering where it fits. Good. That means you're thinking. Instead of reacting. I smiled through my tears. Even now. He knew me well enough to predict my silence. The private banker stepped back respectfully. I'll give you as much time as you need, Mrs. Carter. When the vault door closed behind him, the room became completely still. Only Richard's voice remained. The boys think I spent my life building a company. I didn't. I spent my life building a family. And somewhere along the way, I confused the two. The words settled heavily in my heart. Richard had never admitted regret easily. Hearing him do it now, after he was gone, made every sentence feel sacred. Love doesn't disappear when someone dies. Sometimes it becomes easier to hear because nothing else is left competing with it. We stop listening for answers and begin listening for truth. That's often when the people we've lost speak the loudest inside us. I finally opened the black leather portfolio. Inside were neatly organized documents. Corporate trust agreements. Shareholder records. Board resolutions. Everything was professionally prepared. But one page immediately caught my attention. The Carter Family Holding Trust. I frowned. I had never heard that name before. Richard's voice quietly returned. I never hid money from you. I hid responsibility. My heart skipped. The company everyone sees is only part of what we own. The holding trust controls everything beneath it. I turned another page. My name appeared. Not as a beneficiary. Not as a surviving spouse. As sole successor trustee. I stared at the words, certain I had misunderstood them. Richard continued. Daniel believes he runs the company. Michael believes he owns the future. They're both wrong. For 43 years. You reviewed every acquisition beside me. You questioned every loan. You caught mistakes I never saw. You never wanted credit. So I stopped giving it. His voice cracked slightly. And that was my greatest mistake. Tears rolled freely down my face. Not because of the trust. Because after all these years, he had finally said something I never needed to hear. Yet had quietly carried inside him. I had never wanted recognition. Only partnership. The folder contained one final sealed envelope. Across the front, Richard had written only 3 words. Open after dinner. I almost laughed. You still think you can tell me what to do? His recorded voice answered immediately. Yes. I do. Despite everything. I smiled. For just a moment. It felt like we were sitting across the kitchen table again. Planning another impossible week together. Before leaving the vault, the banker returned carrying a small fireproof lockbox. Mrs. Carter. Mr. Carter also instructed us to release this today. I looked down. The tiny silver key fit perfectly into the lock. It opened with a gentle click. Inside, there was no cash. No jewelry. Only a single flash drive. And a handwritten note. Mary. This one isn't for you. It's for our sons. Please don't let them watch it. Until they've become desperate enough to finally listen. A cold feeling settled over me. Richard hadn't been preparing an inheritance. He had been preparing a reckoning. And somehow, he already knew the day would come when our own children would need to hear the truth from a father who was no longer alive. Richard had left one instruction beneath the flash drive. Do not watch this alone. I drove home carrying the fireproof lockbox on the passenger seat. For the first time in 43 years. The house felt unfamiliar. Every room still looked the same. Richard's reading glasses rested beside his favorite chair. His coffee mug was still beside the kitchen sink. His jacket still hung by the back door. Nothing had moved. Except him. I carried the lockbox into his study. The same room where he had spent countless nights reviewing contracts while I quietly balanced company budgets beside him. I inserted the flash drive into his old desktop computer. The screen remained black for several seconds. Then, Richard appeared. He looked thinner than I remembered. The illness had already begun stealing his strength. But not his smile. Hello, sweetheart. If you're watching this. You ignored my instruction. I laughed despite the tears. So. You are alone. I knew you would be. He leaned back gently. I also know you're wondering why I never told you about the holding trust. His eyes softened. Because you would have argued with me. You would have insisted the boys deserved to learn naturally. And I wanted to believe that too. He paused. I was wrong. Some people leave behind money. Others leave behind advice. The rarest people leave behind understanding. Long after their voices are gone, they continue answering questions we haven't even learned to ask yet. Richard opened a worn leather notebook. I need you to understand something. Our sons were not born dishonest. I helped create the men they've become. The words caught me completely off guard. I rewarded results. I excused arrogance because profits were growing. I confused confidence with character. I kept telling myself, they'll mature. They'll slow down. They'll learn. Another long pause. They didn't. The screen changed. A scanned document appeared. Bank transfers. Corporate expense reports. Casino payments. Private loans. Richard spoke quietly. Daniel has been hiding gambling losses for almost 3 years. I covered them twice. I told myself I was protecting my family. I was actually protecting his bad decisions. Another document appeared. Luxury purchases. Private charter flights. Consulting invoices that made little sense. Michael never understood the value of money. Because I never required him to earn it. I covered my mouth. Richard had known. All this time. Yet he never humiliated our sons. Never exposed them publicly. He simply kept hoping they would choose differently. I still love them. I always will. But love without accountability becomes permission. His voice grew quieter. So I built something stronger than my own authority. The trust. It doesn't protect money. It protects the company. Richard's voice remained calm. Don't open the email yet. First. Walk downstairs. I removed the flash drive. Closed the computer. And slowly walked toward the kitchen. Every step echoed through a house that suddenly felt far too large for one person. The grandfather clock Richard had restored with his own hands still marked every passing second. The smell of his favorite coffee beans still lingered in the pantry. Nothing had changed. Except everything. I reached the kitchen island. Exactly where we had shared breakfast almost every morning for 43 years. Richard's voice returned through my earbud. Open the second drawer. I smiled through another wave of tears. You still remember where I hide everything. He laughed softly on the recording. I should. I built that drawer for you. I pulled it open. Inside lay a small velvet pouch. I had never seen it before. There was another handwritten note. Mary. Before you read another document, I need you to remember something. You were never standing behind me. You were standing beside me. I simply forgot to let the rest of the world see it. I covered my mouth. Those words reached a place inside me that money never could. For years, people introduced me as Richard Carter's wife. I never minded. Because I knew who we were when no one else was watching. Still, hearing him finally say those words felt like receiving the only promotion I had ever wanted. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't recognition from the world. It's hearing the one person who truly knew your sacrifices finally give them a name. Love isn't measured by who stands in front. It's measured by who quietly stays beside us when no one is keeping score. Inside the velvet pouch. You caught the mistakes. I made the speeches. You made sure I never embarrassed myself with bad numbers. I received the applause. You accepted the silence. His voice grew quieter. And I let that silence last far too long. Tears rolled freely down my face. Not because I wanted credit. But because he had understood. Completely. Then his tone changed. More serious now. The boys never saw this version of you. That was my fault. I protected them from hardship. And I accidentally protected them from your strength. A long pause followed. If they ever mistake your kindness for weakness, don't argue. Don't defend yourself. Just let them keep talking. They always reveal more than they intend. I frowned. Richard continued. The email you're about to read isn't the trap. The trap begins after they think they've already won. My heart tightened. I opened my laptop on the kitchen table. The scheduled email appeared exactly where he had promised. The subject line still read, "They will try to take your freedom before they try to take your money." I clicked it open. Only one sentence appeared. Tomorrow morning. At exactly 9 o'clock. Say yes to everything they ask. I stared at the screen. Say yes? Richard. What are you planning? For the first time since his funeral, I realized my husband wasn't trying to teach me how to fight. He was teaching me how to let the truth expose itself. Richard had never asked me to lie. He had only asked me to wait. At exactly 9 o'clock. The front doorbell rang. Right on time. I opened the door. Daniel stood there wearing an expensive navy suit. Michael followed behind him. Their wives smiled politely. Too politely. Morning, Mom. Daniel kissed my cheek. We thought we'd check on you. I stepped aside. Come in. Richard's voice quietly echoed through my earbud. Good. Daniel unfolded several legal documents. We've been thinking. You've been through so much. Michael nodded sympathetically. We don't want you worrying about business decisions. His wife gently placed a cup of tea in front of me. You deserve to rest. I simply smiled. Richard had predicted every sentence. Daniel slid the paperwork across the coffee table. It's only temporary. A medical authorization. So we can handle things while you recover. I looked down. It wasn't temporary. It would give them broad authority over my financial decisions. Exactly as Richard had warned. I slowly nodded. All right. Four faces immediately relaxed. Michael smiled. We knew you'd understand. Richard whispered calmly. Keep saying yes. There is a quiet strength that comes from refusing to fight too early. People often reveal their true intentions when they believe they've already convinced us. Patience isn't surrender. Sometimes it's simply giving the truth enough room to speak for itself. Daniel continued. We've also found a wonderful assisted living community. You'll have nurses. Housekeeping. Everything you need. I nodded again. That sounds thoughtful. His wife reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We only want what's best for you. Richard almost sounded amused. Listen carefully now. They're getting comfortable. The conversation slowly changed. Their voices became less careful. Michael leaned back. We'll probably need to sell the house. No reason to keep a place this big. Daniel answered without looking at me. The holding company should transfer smoothly once Mom signs. I remained perfectly still. They spoke as though I had already left the room. Then, Daniel laughed quietly. Dad always treated Mom like she understood finance. Michael smiled. He loved her. But she never really handled the complicated stuff. I lowered my eyes. Not because I believed them. Because Richard had asked me to stay silent. A person who constantly interrupts never hears what others truly believe. Sometimes silence becomes a mirror. Given enough time, people begin speaking not to us, but to themselves. That's when hidden character quietly steps into the light. Daniel gathered the It means the boys arrived sooner than grief. Daniel's face tightened. That's enough. Thomas continued without looking up. They'll tell you these documents are temporary. They'll say they're protecting you. They'll promise you'll always be taken care of. Richard paused in the letter. I had attended almost every important meeting with Richard. I simply chose the chair that wasn't at the head of the table. People rarely notice Richard made the final decision. After discussing every important one with your mother. Richard's voice became softer. I loved standing in front of the room. Your mother loved making sure I never stood there unprepared. I received the applause. She accepted the responsibility. Richard believed every conversation deserved its proper time. Daniel looked at me for several long seconds. His voice had changed, but he did not build it alone. The reason this company survived for 40 years was because people were willing to protect it when no one was watching. A few executives exchanged glances. Then I began speaking. Richard hadn't been preparing me for a business battle. He had been preparing me for the fight to save our family. Richard's voice was quieter than ever. Almost as if he knew this would be the hardest letter for me to read. Mary. If you're here, then the company is safe. I knew it would be. I never doubted you. I smiled through my tears. After 43 years. He still knew exactly which words would steady my heart. Then his voice changed. Slower. Heavier. But now. You have to save something I couldn't. I looked back at the letter. Our sons. I read the next page carefully. Richard had written every sentence by hand. Not as a businessman. As a father. Daniel isn't evil. He's afraid. He spent his whole life believing my approval depended on winning. I taught him that without realizing it. Another paragraph. Michael isn't selfish. He's empty. I filled every hole in his life with money. So he never learned how to fill one with purpose. I closed my eyes. Every sentence hurt. Because every sentence was true. Richard wasn't accusing our sons. He was confessing. Sometimes the people we love don't become who we hoped they would because they rejected our values. Sometimes they simply learned the wrong lesson from the example we quietly lived. Love isn't only measured by what we give our children. It's also measured by what they believe we expected from them. My phone suddenly vibrated. Thomas Bennett. Mrs. Carter. I think you should come downstairs. His voice sounded unusually serious. When I reached the executive lobby, Daniel and Michael were already there. So were two federal investigators. No handcuffs. No raised voices. Only quiet questions. Daniel looked completely shaken. One investigator spoke calmly. We're reviewing several financial transfers connected to outside gaming accounts. My heart sank. Richard had known. Long before anyone else. Daniel looked toward me. Mom. I can explain. Before he could continue, Thomas gently handed me another sealed envelope. Richard had labeled it. If Daniel ever says, I can explain. My hands began trembling. I opened it. Inside was another handwritten letter. Mary. Please don't interrupt him. Let him finish. For once. Our son needs someone to listen before anyone tries to rescue him. I folded the letter. Looked at Daniel. Then quietly nodded. I'm listening. The words poured out of him. The gambling losses. The secret loans. The desperate attempts to recover everything before Richard discovered the truth. I kept thinking one more win would fix it. It never did. Michael stood completely still. He had never heard any of this. Neither had I. Richard's voice returned. You wanted to save him 100 times. I know. So did I. And every time we paid the price for his mistakes. We accidentally taught him he never had to face them. The investigators remained patient. No one interrupted. Daniel finally lowered his head. I don't need you to pay this for me anymore. I just. He stopped speaking. Then whispered something I had waited years to hear. I'm tired of pretending. No one in the room moved. For the first time since Richard's funeral, the silence no longer belonged to grief. It belonged to honesty. Thomas quietly stepped beside me. There is one final video. Richard instructed me not to release it until both boys were finally ready to hear their father. Daniel slowly looked up. His eyes were red. For the first time in many years, he no longer looked like the CEO of Carter Industries. He looked like a little boy, about to hear his father speak one last time. Thomas placed the flash drive into the conference room screen. No one spoke. Daniel sat on my left. Michael sat beside him. Neither looked at each other. Richard appeared on the screen wearing the same navy sweater he always wore on Sunday mornings. He smiled. Not like a chairman. Not like a billionaire. Just like a father. If you're watching this, then something finally happened that I prayed would happen. You stopped pretending. Daniel lowered his head. Michael quietly wiped his eyes. Richard leaned forward. I don't know what mistakes you've made. I don't know how much money you've lost. I don't know what secrets you've been carrying. And honestly, I don't need to. He paused. Because this video was never made to judge you. It was made to free you. No father wants to become his children's final lesson. Every parent hopes love will be enough while they're alive. But sometimes the greatest act of love is leaving behind the truth our children are only willing to hear after we've gone. Richard slowly picked up an old family photograph. It showed the four of us standing outside the tiny warehouse where Carter Industries had begun. Daniel was 12. Michael had just turned 9. You boys remember this place? We couldn't afford office furniture. So your mother used folding tables. You thought it was an adventure. He smiled. But here's what you never knew. Those weren't temporary tables. They were all we could afford. He looked directly into the camera. Every contract I signed. Your mother reviewed. Every payroll check. Your mother made sure our employees received before we paid ourselves. His eyes softened. You grew up believing I built this company. I let you believe that. I was wrong. He turned towards someone off camera. A younger version of me appeared for just a second, laughing while carrying coffee into the office. Richard smiled at the memory. I never walked in front of your mother. I walked beside her. And when people applauded me, they were applauding work that belonged to both of us. The room became completely silent. Daniel slowly looked toward me. Not with guilt. With understanding. For the very first time. Real strength doesn't always announce itself while history is being written. Sometimes it waits quietly in the background until the people who benefited from it are finally mature enough to recognize whose shoulders they had been standing on all along. Richard took a slow breath. Now I need to apologize. Not to your mother. To both of you. I taught you how to build success. I forgot to teach you how to carry it. I celebrated your victories. I rescued you from your failures. I thought I was protecting you. I was only delaying the lessons life was trying to give you. Daniel quietly began crying. Michael covered his face with both hands. Richard continued. So listen carefully. Your mother is not your punishment. She is my final gift to you. If she holds you accountable, let her. If she asks you to start over, do it. If she refuses to rescue you, thank her. Because she'll be doing something I was too afraid to do. The video ended with Richard looking straight into the camera one last time. Boys, don't spend the rest of your lives trying to earn your inheritance. Spend it becoming the kind of men your mother will be proud to call her sons. The screen faded to black. No one moved. No one spoke. For several long moments. The only sound in the room was the quiet breathing of two grown men. Finally hearing their father's heart instead of his success. The room remained silent long after the screen went dark. No one rushed to speak. No one argued. For the first time in many years, there was nothing left to defend. Daniel slowly stood. He walked toward me. Not as the president of a company. Not as a man expecting forgiveness. Simply as a son. I'm sorry, Mom. I've been trying to become Dad. I forgot how to become his son. I wrapped my arms around him. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because Richard had been right. This was never about punishment. It was about truth. Michael stepped forward next. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I don't know how to fix everything. I gently held his hand. You don't have to fix everything today. You only have to stop running. Richard had spent months preparing documents. Letters. Videos. Legal protections. But none of them were his greatest legacy. His greatest legacy was creating one final opportunity for his family to choose each other again. A few months later, Daniel resigned as chief executive officer. Not because anyone forced him. Because he wanted to rebuild his life honestly. He accepted a position managing one regional manufacturing division. For the first time in his career, his success would come one decision at a time. Michael entered a long-term recovery program. When he returned, he asked to work with the company's Employee Assistance Foundation. He wanted to help families facing the same struggles he had hidden for years. People rarely become stronger the moment they admit they've fallen. They become stronger the first time they stop pretending they haven't. Healing doesn't begin when life becomes easy. It begins when honesty finally becomes less frightening than the secret we've been carrying. As for me, I accepted the role of chairwoman. Not to replace Richard. No one ever could. I simply continued the work we had always shared. Every major decision still began the same way. With one question. What would protect the people who trust us? The company expanded carefully. Employee profit sharing increased. Retirement benefits improved. Scholarships were created for the children of factory workers. Not because we wanted headlines. Because Richard always believed a successful business should leave ordinary families better than it found them. One quiet Saturday morning, I visited the original warehouse where Carter Industries had begun. The folding table from our first office still stood in the corner. Weathered. Scratched. Beautiful. I placed Richard's first employee badge beside my own. Employee number 1. Employee number 2. Exactly where they belonged. Then I unfolded the final note Thomas had quietly handed me after everyone left the conference room. Richard had written only one sentence. Mary. Thank you for never letting me build this dream alone. I smiled through tears that no longer felt heavy. Love had carried us through 43 years. It had carried me through grief. And somehow, it had carried our family back to one another. If you've stayed with me until the end, I hope this story reminds you of something Richard taught all of us. The greatest inheritance we leave behind is never measured by dollars. It's measured by the character we help build in the people we love. Long after we're gone.